The workshop never promised greatness. Greatness was a word used by people who arrived after the suffering was over. The workshop promised something else. Another attempt, another attempt, another attempt. And for a very long time, there had to be enough. The benches were crowded with unfinished futures, half-card frames, bent bracket springs twisted into exhaustion, copper pathways ending abruptly as though confidence itself had run out of material.
Nothing in the workshop
looked heroic, nothing looked destined, everything looked temporary, experimental, replaceable. The old mechanics preferred it that way. They distrusted anything that succeeded too quickly. Fast victories often hit fragile foundations. Strong things usually arrive through slower routes. Routes paved with embarrassment, with confusion, with repetition so relentless it eventually resembled weather outside. People imagine learning as a staircase. Inside the workshop, learning looked more like erosion.
The river never teaches the stone through kindness. The furnace never teaches brass through comfort. The whetstone never teaches steel
through encouragement.
Transformation has always spoken
with rough hands. Each evening, the dreaming engines opened and Jack disappeared, not into sleep, into possibility. Entire worlds assembled themselves around unfinished understanding. In one lifetime, a wrong choice arrived disguised as certainty. In another, fear wore the costume of caution. In another, confidence marched proudly toward disaster. The simulations were patient, reality often isn't, so they allowed failure to repeat itself. Thousands of different ways, the lesson remained unchanged. The angle changed, the costume changed, the scenery changed, the lesson waited again. The clocks counted attempts the way glaciers count winters, without urgency, without mercy. There were centuries when improvement became invisible, millennia during which progress advanced by distances too small for hope to measure. The brass darkened, the wood split, the roots kept growing anyway. The roots suffered most, not dramatically, not visibly. No shattered gears, no broken springs, just endless darkness, endless searching, endless uncertainty. 1,000 silent expeditions through soil that offered no guarantee of reward, and yet they continued. Thread after thread, branch after branch, question after question. The workshop often wondered whether intelligence was merely persistence, that it survived long enough to become recognizable. Some nights, entire futures collapse, catastrophes large enough to erase decades of effort. Structures fell, assumptions failed, beautiful theories died ugly deaths. Jack learned a difficult truth: failure rarely arrives as a monster. More often, it arrives as a friend who turns out to be wrong.
Still the springs endured,
still the roots explored,
still the gears turned,
still the clocks counted.
not because success was near,
Not because victory was visible,
not because anyone could prove
the journey mattered, but because stopping would guarantee that it didn't. Years became centuries, centuries became legends, legends became instinct. The brass remembered pressures that Jack could no longer recall. The roots remembered pathways his conscious mind had forgotten. The gears carried knowledge their creator had never explicitly taught. The workshop watched an impossible thing occur, a collection of failures slowly learning how to cooperate. And then, one ordinary morning, nothing remarkable happened. No lightning, no revelation, no triumphant music, only a mechanism quietly discovering that it could finally do what thousands of previous versions had failed to do. The old mechanic smiled, not because Jack had succeeded, because Jack had survived long enough to succeed. There is a difference,
a very important difference.
Visitors would someday admire the smooth motion the balanced design, the elegant decisions, the apparent confidence, the finished result. The workshop would remember the cracked frames, the bird circuits, the exhausted springs, the blind roots, the impossible years, the endless attempts. Because the workshop knew what almost everyone forgets. We never see the fights, only the scars.
Tick.
Another attempt,
Tick, tick,
another attempt,
tick, tick,
another attempt.
tick.
And somewhere inside every finished thing, the broken versions are still quietly holding it together.